Now we are into the core of today's meeting. The main purpose of today is that you meet, you talk, you drink coffee, and you connect. This topic is engaging us all. We know the challenge, we know the risk. You know that you have an expertise. Obviously, you have an interest since you're here. And we're really here to facilitate this interlinkage of what is the challenge that CEPI is working on. This is not only CEPI's challenge. We are working, as Fredrik said, on the vaccine developing part of it. But developing a vaccine is not only having the technology and testing it in a trial. It's also the other areas that facilitate the invention, that facilitate estimating disease burden, the diagnostics that helps you evaluate the disease burden, and also the impact of the vaccine, either it's immunity or safety evaluation or future use and implementation, and how do you actually use a vaccine in the field situation, reactive or preventive, for example. We sent out a questionnaire to the community of the GlobeVac researchers. I must say that the response was not fantastic. It was 9 respondents, but 9 very good respondents. But I think this is the first, it's like a first date. And as you know, first date can go very well, it can go medium and very bad. And this seems to go good as far as I can see. So if we think of what is Norway's role in vaccine development for the key areas in the value chain from preclinical to implementation. One core area is that Norway actually has a history of human vaccine development focused on products. For infectious diseases, we've had a track record of working on meningococcal disease due to the peak of disease that started in the 1970s, peaked in the 1980s. And as with Lassa, as with MERS and Nipah, there was no vaccine against serogroup B meningococcal disease. There was no market for it, and somebody had to do it. There was some candidates in the US, a concept, but not tailored for the outbreak in Norway. So a Norwegian researcher and others went over to the US to learn the technology, and NIPH and actually a whole community of clinicians and scientists, immunologists in Oslo and Bergen engaged in this big challenge. Multiple hospitals were engaged in doing research on the disease cases, the immunity among cases, and on the preclinical and clinical evaluation of these vaccines. And it resulted in a large efficacy trial published in 1991 with a 57% efficacy after 12 months. Some thought that was too low, some think still that it's quite good, and those that thought it was good carried it forward, and it was picked up into a new vaccine in New Zealand, where over 1 million inhabitants received a tailored vaccine for meningococcal B strain that was dominating in New Zealand. Then the Novartis pharmaceutical company picked up this and used that data and the OMV vaccine as part of the vaccine that they now have developed, where they combine it with a recombinant multivalent protein vaccine for serogroup B. So the Norwegian backbone, or OMV, is now a major component of the licensed vaccine Bexzero that has been licensed in multiple European countries and in the US in the last 5 years. So many of you who are here actually contributed to that development pathway in one or other way, and you should be proud of this. It's not that often that a vaccine gets licensed. Other initiatives in Norway have been ongoing in the same time, especially for HIV vaccines with peptides, Birger Sørensen and the VNO group. Multiple clinicians and scientists were involved in this as well, and including the University Hospital of Oslo, where you had a clinical phase 1 trials. Furthermore, we have the vaccibodies that have been developed within the group of Bjarne Bogen, a platform concept that can be tailored to either infectious diseases or cancer vaccines. And they are now getting a lot of support and being transformed into a company. So Bjarne, it's really a credit to you and your team, and several of you are here today, that you managed to convince investors. That's the main signal of success. So we wish you good luck in this endeavor further on, and think that this platform could be useful for lots of other pathogens as well. For cholera vaccine, there's a group in Bergen that has been developed early toxin-based vaccines with NIPH as well. Audun, who's here, has been working with them. There are also cancer vaccines that are in development. This has been gaining support now in the recent years. I also forgot Ultimovax in this list. But the basis has been on the peptide vaccines, and there are also cancer or cancer-related vaccines with the Vaccibody company. So there's multiple products in the pipeline in early stage, preclinical or phase 1. A big part of the vaccine development community in Norway that is often disconnected to the human vaccine compartment is the animal vaccines. And here we have a giant, it's Pharmac, who is actually, I think, the world's biggest fish vaccine producer. And they have recently built a big GMP factory at Kløfta, north of Oslo, where you have the biggest, according to them, the biggest virus vaccine factory in Europe. So this is for animals, but there's still a new facility these days. It's often built with the quality that is GMP, is generic quality, and there are other potential utilities of this in other settings. Then we also have the veterinary school, and there's a whole community around fish, and especially fish vaccines, because of our Norwegian role in aquaculture. There we also have Vaccinova, which I forgot to mention. So this is on the product development side, which is key for getting a drive on a future product. It's part academic, it's part business, but also linking science to the regulatory requirements that you need to understand to achieve a licensed product in the end. On the other side, we have immunology and evaluation of immune responses to vaccinations. We have a famous group at the university, IMI, that has been long-standing multiple immune compartment analysis. And we have the NIPH in Oslo that has worked on evaluation of immunity after vaccination, different vaccines. And for the clinical trial side, we have University of Oslo that has been doing there's a unit that's worked with the Bogen, now with the HIV vaccine. And University of Bergen has been engaged a lot in influenza vaccine projects with the WHO Reference Center. In addition, Center for International Health in Bergen is recognized for their extensive network in developing countries, vaccine-related trials, and large clinical studies. When it comes to infectious disease surveillance, Norway is actually in a position to be one of the early good practice countries when it comes to registers, systematic, consistent, long-term registration of infectious diseases, notifiable and standardized ways of doing it, and also a good quality lab diagnostic network. So this is a tool that is also transferable to other situations, especially when you want to set up systems to evaluate the effect or efficacy of a vaccine. Furthermore, we have a group at the University of Oslo that recently started to collaborate with the CDC in the US on utilizing a open source software that is used for health systems or clinical data and patient data collection in developing countries that is also now adapting their tool to infectious disease reporting format. So this is an internationally recognized group, and it can be utilized. The only drawback of this is that developing countries often have a very poor diagnostic component and a system for reporting individual case-based lab-confirmed data. Finally, efficacy evaluation of vaccines. NIPH has done a large evaluation of the herd effect of meningococcal conjugate vaccine in Burkina Faso. Huge project, one of the biggest coverage studies ever done, at least as far as I know. And we now have an ongoing hepatitis E trial project in Bangladesh that Susanne Dudman and Katrine works on here. And this is one of the few initiatives on hepatitis E with a really kind of unique hepatitis E vaccine that is derived or produced in China. Finally, we have the influenza vaccination program in Norway that has been, because there are good registers, there's good quality of the data and public health registration systems, then you can actually do effect evaluations of implementing a new program. So these are systems that are not always transferable to developing countries because the health systems are quite poor and limited, but there is this standard. You know, you have people, you have systems so that you can transfer skills into settings and adapt to the settings. And that is what we did with the Ebola vaccine trial. We built on what we have learned. We utilized our network of people who have been working in West Africa and knew how to design a study, how to write a protocol. We knew which kind of regulatory requirement we need to fulfill, and how to handle ethics committees when there's tricky questions that are not always straightforward to answer. So in effect, I think this shows that we do have lots to offer. And the question is, how do you apply that to this challenge? We already have announced the calls. We tried to engage the Norwegian researchers to apply with candidates. But as you know, these are extremely rare diseases, so it would be a surprise if any of you had a candidate against Lassa. Then you would have been asked in your past, why on earth do you work on Lassa? Actually, there is a clinician in your unit, Arne. You have had field experience at the Kanema Hospital in Sierra Leone, where there are Lassa patients. So there are people with networks, but a candidate against Lassa, MERS, or Nipah would be quite rare. So these companies, many of them, they had some candidates. They were associated with military or biodefense groups, or with countries that have strong own interest in a vaccine against MERS or Nipah. So what the Norwegian community can do is to now assist CEPI in getting these vaccines towards the end. And there we have a range of vaccine science-related projects that are on epidemiology, facilitating diagnostics evaluation, biological standardization, and academic engagement to address the bottlenecks that you saw here previously. One big issue that or call that would come out is the Lassa phase 3 trial grant that will come from EDCTP. And here the question is, how do you engage in that? They are always large consortia, but they are important to be a network-based, and I think Norwegian research could contribute into this work. For disease X, that is also a future concern. We have the platforms, and that's where we are now. There's a lot that has to be built around response for future outbreaks, and you actually have to choose, because the range of options that you could spend money is big, so you really have to think closely on what is actually smart to invest in. Otherwise you spend everything, and the day there is an outbreak, you actually don't have the capacities you do need to respond. So we are working on this strategy and trying to identify which networks, which kind of routines or protocols or setups will help us to respond quickly in case of an outbreak. And the platforms approach is is a tool, but the adaptation to the outbreak is the key. So, is Norway disconnected to epidemic hotspots? I think clearly we are not. Actually, there are about 15 million passengers each year that travel abroad. And there's an increase year by year, and we are building a new runway at the Gardermoen, so there's increased connection. It doesn't mean that we are affected by all diseases, but because we have a healthy population, there's strong like natural immunity because of good nutrition and so on. But still, there are these risks that we see that we have to prepare for, and we can contribute to mitigate future outbreaks by our expertise. So the question today is this: how do you match the need with the expertise into a vaccine developed for new outbreaks? And I think you are key to this. You can contribute, and now we are going to have a debate, panel debate, led by Ørjan Olsvik from University of Tromsø on this. First, I'd just like to go through some of the responses that you gave. Which areas should Norwegian research and vaccine development community have listed as comparative strength? Is DNA vaccination as a platform? Challenge studies, human challenge studies where you can test vaccine candidates for protection, advanced immunology assessments, TB, HIV, zoonotic infections, vaccine research in low-middle-income countries, epidemiology, and also invention of new vaccine technologies. So this covers a wide area of scientific expertise and topics. Here's the survey results. It's not much of a scientific approach, but it's at least descriptive. And we do have diversity of the expertise. I wish that over time we can build this database further, that we get a more complete picture of what is it that people consider they could assist in. So these are the steps that we consider are key into vaccine development: public health, emerging infectious diseases, product development, clinical development, manufacturing, and regulatory and IP. So in terms of what areas people would like to develop, these are international collaborations for clinical research, immune response, clinical trials, epi-intelligence, preparedness and management, zoonotic infections, regulatory commercialization, and also study effect of vaccination in outbreak settings, meaning efficacy trial, assume, and finally DNA vaccination in humans. So in the end, some views on CEPI. People seem to think it's important what you do. That's important to us as well. Also, there is a dual motivation. It's protect the hotspot, the populations in the areas most affected, but also, of course, a self-interest in making sure the local population here is able to access future vaccines. But the focus for CEPI is on populations that are affected by the outbreaks. So, great improvement potential. I'd like to discuss with the person what we can improve. So, we are here to be improved, basically. We are not experts on everything. Okay, so thanks. That is what we got out of the survey and what we think are key strengths. Now I'd like to hand over to... Yes. Yeah, we need a short break, so if you just chat for a few minutes, and then Ørjan will take over.